Supreme Court just ruled 5-4 that the Trump administration must follow through with payments of up to $2 billion in foreign aid out of that USAID money that the Trump administration froze. So what the hell's going on here in the Supreme Court? Is this the end of it? Do we now have to fund regime change operations abroad because of this? Like the Supreme Court is basically telling the Trump administration, you've got to send American taxpayer dollars overseas for like circumcisions in Uganda to, I don't know, weapons to Ukraine. This is outrageous to me.
Well, Eric Eggers is the co-host of the Drilldown podcast with Peter Schweizer and the vice president of research at the Government Accountability Institute. Thank you for joining us, Eric. What is your impression of this Supreme Court ruling? Is it a betrayal? Is this the end? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, thank you for having me, guys. And I just want to say I'm totally on board with the positive vibes you're cultivating, right? I mean, it's the anti-war message, it's the THC drinks. But I will say also, as a child of divorce, the simmering marital tension makes me feel right at home. So I'm really glad to be here. Thank you guys so much.
Simmering.
And we will continue to alienate our audience by fighting in front of you then.
It's on the surface.
I think you've done it. I think you've done it with the Hamas, the pro-Hamas stances. Yeah. So, but I am going to keep it positive in this sense, because I don't think that this is the end of things. I think if you read the Supreme Court, first off, it's a very well-articulated dissent by Justice Alito, and I've read some legal analysis that suggests that this is sort of narrow in terms of this is for completed work, so they're not allowed to have this temporary restraining order because the work's been done, but this is something that can be reauthorized, or that people can kind of reappeal this, and the fact that there's already 4 Supreme Court justices who agree that the pause was legal means that they'll be able to re-examine this again shortly. But I think that the bigger point of all of this is what actual transparency looks like. I mean, think about what happened with Zelensky and Trump and the Oval Office, and they had basically, as you all did, you had just an open discussion in which multiple viewpoints were shared for public consumption. This is not a prepackaged thing that you have the Trump administration trying to make real things happen in real time, and this is what real democracy looks like. We were told democracy would be on the ballot. The opposite's true. The checks and balances of the system are working. So you've got the Trump administration, you got Elon Musk saying, hey, we're going to cut these things. And the judicial system has their voice to be heard. And so I think this is what America is supposed to do. And this is what makes America great.
I think that's a great point. I like the positivity. I really do today on the show. I'm feeling the vibes because Amy Coney Barrett is a Trump appointee, right? And so she's one of the main dissenting voices here that sided on this idea of releasing this USAID money. And of course, one of the big questions you get when you're going through confirmation hearings for Supreme Court justice is, hey, are you going to be in the tank for the president, or are you going to be a free thinker here based on the merit of the case? And so maybe in this situation, she's looking at this saying, hey, this is money for work that was already completed. And it's like the American people has to pay its contractors because they've actually already completed the work. And this is money that's meant to go there, right?
No, I think that that's a very charitable take. I don't think it's wrong necessarily. The decision wasn't signed. And so I think people are rightfully a little concerned about Justice Roberts and Coney Barrett being on the side of the liberals. But, there's lots of different ways to look at these legal analysis, and what they could be deciding on is a very narrow legal position, not some larger liberal worldview about should the president have unchecked power to just unilaterally freeze funding that was already agreed on in some other way. So I think it's okay to just pause and breathe and let's have a discussion. If people are concerned about, you saw the signs last night, Trump's not a king. If anything, this erodes that liberal talking point. Look, no, he doesn't just get to decree things. The Supreme Court does matter. But what I actually think it speaks to is a much larger threat, not the Supreme Court, but for lack of a better term, the deep state. I know your guest before this talked about Tom Massey a lot. So Thomas Massey actually tweeted that while people may be concerned about this decision, Congress was actually set to support a continuing resolution next week that would fund everything in government at the same levels in 2025 as they would have in 2024. So for all the work that DOGE is doing, Congress, per Thomas Massey, seems poised to actually continue the status quo, and the deep state continues to make sure all of their vendors and contractors get paid. So I think it just shows you what happened in Ukraine, I mean, it's hard to make things change. There's billions of dollars on the table, and lots of people's livelihoods depend on the status quo continuing. There's a reason why 7 out of the 10 wealthiest counties in this country, the 4 wealthiest zip codes in this country, are around Washington, D.C. This is their business model. It is not easily upended. And so I think it's okay for multiple voices to have their say in this, as the Supreme Court did today.
Now, do you think that this could be appealed? Because it does seem the Supreme Court is allowing a temporary standing, but there can be more litigation in a lower court. So will this continue? And I guess the point you're making is, does it even matter, because we can pay those bills, but it won't matter if we're taking on new ones, right?
Absolutely. So I think that, there's lots of different moving pieces here, and don't let the blazer fool you. I'm not an attorney, but based on the analysis that I did read, it suggests that because of the fact that there are 4 justices who dissented in this opinion, it takes 4 justices to decide to take this back up when it does get reappealed. And that can happen, I believe, as early as next week, based on what I read by Jonathan Turley. So, so I don't think this is a permanent, now that one judge gets the decree, as Alito questioned in the decision. One lower court judge doesn't just get to decide what gets funded and what doesn't. This is the legal process at work. It's obviously, you have a wide perspective ideologically of justices that seem to agree. And so, but I think it could be in a very narrow way for work that's been completed. And I think if you consider the counterfactual position, if people decided just to yank funding for something that had already been done, that doesn't seem like consistent with American values. So, I don't think that this is some sea change for what the government can or can't do. I just think that this is a narrow position. And I think that we should actually be really encouraged. On our podcast, we talk a lot about how DOGE is changing the way we even have conversations about budgeting in this country. I'm old enough to remember when Mitt Romney ran primarily on the fiscal irresponsibility of the fiscal government, and people kind of laughed at him and said nobody really cares about debt. That's changed now. And so one Supreme Court justice decision will not change the fact that we are talking about budgeting, talking about federal spending in a very different way. Just look at the amount of content dedicated to the speech last night.
Yeah, for sure. Eric Eggers is host of the Drilldown podcast. You can listen to that and get more of that brilliant insight from Eric and Peter over there. Thank you guys. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.